How's it going, everyone? So today I watched the 1988 Lucio Fulci film Enigma, and I have to say, in my experience with Fulci thus far, this is one of the lesser outings for him. It's a bit on the uneven side. I mean, it's not like a bomb or anything like that, but I did have, I guess a bit of a letdown with it overall. But to start off with the good, it does have a very confident look to it. I know I've read some criticisms of the cinematography in the movie, but for the most part, this worked for me pretty all right. It's not his most visually sort of sumptuous or interesting movie, but it has a nice, consistent palette that I think served the story and the tone well. There is one opening shot where we're following the heroine Kathy, and she walks, down a hallway, and there's a big staircase with the red carpet behind her, and then she sprints towards the camera. Just a great shot, beautifully gliding, and Kathy herself is immediately very sympathetic, very intriguing, a little bit shy, and quite frankly, even though I get that the premise is supposed to be that she's a relatively unattractive girl and hence that's why she's shy, I actually thought she had a very sort of understated exotic look to her. But hey, different strokes. And and she ends up being the victim of a high school prank. She thinks she's going out on a date, and some other people, classmates, peers, are secretly spying on her, and then the rug gets pulled out of her, and she gets humiliated. We've seen that kind of thing before, but the way it's done here, it made me think that it almost makes it play a little bit sort of pertinently, especially with the level of sort of like cyber bullying and humiliation that we face in the modern era. Kathy eventually flees the vehicle while she's being chased and taunted by the others, and ends up, running across the path of an oncoming car and getting struck and put in a pretty bad coma. Pretty bad coma. There's no such thing as a good coma genius. Now, I have to say, when she dies, it's a little bit comical. And interestingly, it's the same problem that I saw in a giallo I reviewed about a week or so ago called Dark Glasses, where this person could have totally avoided being hit by this car. They had plenty of time while it was oncoming to dart one way or the other, but they just kind of throw their hands up and scream. And it's like, why? Why? Well, because the script needs it to happen, I know, but still, I mean, come on, guys. When Kathy's spirit leaves her body and goes searching, I guess, for a host and also for the people that she wants to exact revenge on, there's a very cool overhead shot of the city before it zeroes in on the school. If I remember it correctly, it was at that point. And it's very clearly all done with miniatures, but just the fact that they took the time to build something practical, shows effort and resourcefulness. And I also just like it because it's one of those things like the cardboard buildings in a Godzilla movie, or, stop motion animation or puppetry, where even though you're fully aware that this is artifice, the fact that it is actually real physical material kind of gives it its own reality. Definitely had a big sort of like warm grin on my face that entire shot. Something about it just brought up, the affectionate side of me as a film fan. When we get to the point where Kathy finally starts carrying out her revenge once she's possessed the body of a woman named Eva, this is sort of where things start to go downhill for me a little bit. The actress playing Eva, I mean, I'd have to look up her name again, pardon me, but I thought she was just a dead ringer for Margot Robbie or Samara Weaving or someone like that. If they ever chose to remake this film, either one of them would fit into that really nicely. And I guess it starts to decline here for me, mainly because even though you do still get some entertaining moments and a couple of pretty decent kills, the pace just becomes so slack and inflated. But before I get ahead of myself, starting off with the first victim, he is a douchebag aerobic instructor when we find him, and it's terrible sleazy stuff. Of course, he's grinning and staring at all the women and feeling them up and letting them feel him up, and it's almost like, he essentially kind of agrees to go on a date with Eva slash Kathy, almost arbitrarily when it's all said and done. And to give you an idea of what a self-absorbed, self-centered, and egotistical douche this guy is, he shows up for the date, or at least when we find him waiting for the date at the gym again, of course. He is wearing the same goddamn shirt. I mean, he's changed his pants, but did he even shower? I mean, man, a little bit of class. Come on here. And it is sort of poetic that he's strangled by his own reflection, although the effect that they use of him, it looks like he's just reaching through saran wrap or something like that, is, kind of unintentionally hilarious. And while it's sort of entertaining, having him being strangled by his own reflection ultimately still feels a little bit heavy-handed. I mean, it fits, yes, he's a narcissistic dick, but you could have still been a little more clever than that. And then the death where one girl is smothered and violated by an entire pack of snails is actually pretty creepy and raunchy, and not honestly something that I have ever really seen used as a device this way in many other horror movies. I mean, there's plenty of other insects that show up in these kinds of films, but this is one of the first times I can think of snails being used. And I kind of liked it, actually. I liked it because snails are one of those creatures like a frog that can, in some instances, be cute and serene and endearing. But because you're not necessarily used to seeing them in a horror movie all the time, even though they do have that sort of viscous presence about them, it comes with a bit more of an ambiguity that makes it all the more threatening because they're sort of puzzling instead of just being scary and foreboding. And then the remaining kills aren't bad, I suppose, but they're not all that memorable. One person gets decapitated by having a blind fall down on them, and another one is crushed by a statue, although that primarily happens off screen. It's also very confusing the way that it's choreographed and shot. Like, I will confess, I had to go back and look at it again to figure out that that's what happened there. Or maybe I'm just a dope, I don't know. And then insulating all the runtime in between those moments is a very uninteresting love triangle involving Eva and Jenny. And there's a little bit of psychodrama there when Eva's nature via Kathy starts to affect the doctor's nightmares and makes him suspicious. But when you think about where the movie ultimately ends up, that doesn't really go anywhere. It almost feels like that whole plot was there just to kind of pad on to the runtime. Like, there was a good, what felt like almost like 30-minute stretch of this film where I was almost feeling checked out. Like, I had to go and make another cup of coffee just to make sure that I wasn't losing it. I wasn't, but the movie just wasn't holding my attention. And then the way that the movie ends, it really makes me think that they should have probably developed the relationship between Kathy and her mom a little bit better, both pre-coma and post. Because having her mom be involved and be the one to ultimately let her go, that is an interesting dynamic, and it's kind of something that separates this a little bit from just being a very sort of bargain basement Carrie ripoff, even though in a lot of ways it kind of is. But with so little screen time having been devoted to it up until the ending, and the fact that this movie begins with the premise of being about revenge, makes this movie ultimately feel like it kind of loses its way towards the finish. So overall, while I would say that this movie does have a lot of good ideas, it ultimately suffers from a lack of urgency and a rather uneven script. Like, it just to me doesn't feel like a movie that in its heart feels like it's necessary. It's almost like Fulci, I think I wrote here, he's either holding back or just not really that passionate about what he's doing here. And that's not ultimately the kind of filmmaking mentality that I would associate with a guy like Lucio Fulci. So if you're a Fulci fan, you've probably already seen this. But if you're on the fence, or this is your first foray into Fulci for the Halloween season, and you're looking to add something to your playlist, I would start with either The Beyond or Zombie, because while this is by no means a completely terrible film, Aenigma is far from mind-blowing. Well, that's all I've got for now. Stay tuned for more soon. I am getting very close to being done the Brooklyn Nine-Nine Halloween Heist special, And we just got news that Terrifier 2 is going to be playing here in Canadian theaters starting tomorrow. I don't even quite have the words to describe how excited I am for that at this point, so I will definitely be seeing that over the weekend and having a review up for that probably on Halloween. So stay tuned and thanks for watching.